The New York Times reported the White House was reviewing plans to send more than 120,000 troops to the Middle East to deal with Iran. News the president denied, but also signaled he's ready to make military moves if necessary. One of the many things we're going to try to get in with our guest tonight, Democratic strategist Kevin Walling, up late and live with me on the Final Five. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Jim, good to be with you.
Hey, let's talk about this. So first of all, we know that the New York Times report came out. We know that there's been some tension between the U.S. and Iran for a while. Is this the real deal, or is this saber rattling, which is something this administration has been pretty good at doing?
Yeah, Jim, I hope it's saber rattling. As we saw in your intro, Pentagon plans include 120,000 troops, many of whom would be on the ground. And we've seen how this story ends in Iraq. And in fact, one of the main players from the war in Iraq is John Bolton, back on the scene as the national security advisor, who's really trumping up a lot of these fears without a lot of cause that I've seen.
Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas has been making the rounds. He wrote a book, but obviously this has been a topic that's been brought to his attention. He says, you know, the U.S. can take care of Iran in 2 strikes, and that's it. It seems like that slam dunk prediction is very similar to what we heard in Iraq 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, who could forget that mission accomplished banner across the aircraft carrier just a month after fighting with President Bush? You know, there are real concerns on the ground in the Middle East, and I think the American people are really hesitant to get involved in another war on the ground there, when we should have our sights on China, when we should have our sights on Russia, you know, as you're talking about election security in this country, and keep our eyes on the ball and not on this trumped-up plan with Iran.
But is there any reason to, I mean, we know that Iran really wants to get back into the business of being a nuclear power. They really would love that more than anything. I mean, does Iran, do they pose a threat to us in your estimation, or is this a way that they pose a threat, we can deal with it some other way?
Yeah, Jim, they posed a threat before the Iran nuclear negotiations conducted by the previous administration. But what they agreed to was halting all of their enrichment series for weapons. They could enrich based on energy production, but had halted their weapons program. But of course, after a year in office, President Trump tore that policy up. They kept in it with the Europeans, but now we're seeing with these escalations with Iran that they're moving back towards an escalation policy, which is problematic for everybody in that region.
Let's talk about a dispute of a different type. We're looking at the trade dispute between China and the U.S., and you can look at it from 2 ways. One, from a consumer, where the average price of a washer and dryer has gone up $80–90. You can look at it from the perspective of companies like U.S. Steel, who they're about to spend $1 billion to boost their production in the U.S. because they're making money because they say of the tariffs. How much longer is this going to go on before one side blinks?
Yeah, it's a good question. Now the Trump administration is saying it could go on years, which is problematic. And I'll give an example from right here in the district. I was at a new restaurant on the wharf. They cost $1 million more to build because of steel tariffs. A new restaurant down there. So it's really hurting American consumers right now in the short term, with not an end in sight with this administration. It's really problematic.
But do you think there's been a lot of attention? You know, the people who voted for President Trump, they voted for him because he had said, I'm going to play tough with a lot of these powers. And the question is, at what point, I mean, do they stand, are they ride or die with him, or when it starts hitting their pocketbook? Because we always say voters vote with their pocketbook.
Yeah, they do. They absolutely do. And you're starting to see some fatigue, I think, in some of these key states that he needs to carry in 2020. States like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that are huge into manufacturing. They're huge into farming. You have an entire dairy farming community in Wisconsin that is being ravaged right now. And I think they were willing to go with him for a short term, but with no end in sight. And the rhetoric that's being trumped up right now by this administration is really yielding some hurtful policies.
Kevin, don't think I haven't noticed you using the verb trumped a couple of times. I see a meaning there, but I'll let you go with it. Hey, Kevin Wong, thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Jim.
All right, back after this in the Final Five.